I just got done watching Nick Cage play Dracula in the brand new movie Renfield, which is about Renfield, the tortured aide to his narcissistic boss, which if you've ever had a terrible boss, you will heavily relate to this movie. Renfield is forced to procure his master's prey and do his every bidding. However, after centuries of servitude, he's ready to see if there's a life outside the shadow of the Prince of Darkness. Now, this again stars Nicolas Cage as Dracula, which just right off the bat there, you know you're going to get some good vibes from this movie. You know there's going to be some great aspects to the film because it's Nick Cage playing Dracula. And there's no doubt about it. That's great. We're going to talk about that. But it also stars Nicholas Hoult, who I found to be a very underrated actor. And he, of course, plays Renfield, his assistant, and is actually the main character of this movie. But there's actually quite a few other people, like Awkwafinia's in this, Ben Schwartz, and going into this film, I'm not gonna lie, I thought the marketing was pretty poor for this. The trailers looked fine, there were some cool elements to it, the posters were okay at best, but I just never could really get excited for this movie, and that sucks because it's Nicolas Cage playing Dracula. So I went into this movie, left my expectations at the door, just wanted to enjoy my time, and within the first 20 minutes, I was sold on this film. I was sold on it in so many different departments, and I didn't know why, because it's weird. This is a weird movie, and I think looking at Chris McKay as a director, what he's really done with his live action premieres, whether it's with the Tomorrow War or now with Renfield, is you can definitely tell he has this sense of filmmaking that feels like it would be films made back in the 80s and the 90s. We saw with the Tomorrow War, it definitely felt like a sci-fi war film that would have again come out in that day and age, just more with modern day technology. With Renfield, it's that same exact thing. Imagine the days of practical effects within John Carpenter's films, but then you have aspects of Mortal Kombat, the movie, and I definitely mean this, and you mash those together. And it's like me telling you that Ed Boon, the creator of Mortal Kombat, came in and said, we're going to throw Dracula in, and that's the only character you're going to play as, and your character is going to have the powers of Dracula, and you're going to see him pull a ton of fatalities. That is exactly what this film is. It is an action horror comedy to its highest degree. There's laughs, there's screams, there's shocks, there's tons of blood and gore, and this is one of the biggest surprises that I have seen in a while. There's been times where I've seen films where they just have okay marketing, but I still have like some good aspects to it. I went into this film thinking it was going to be a very big disappointment and that Nick Cage was going to be the best aspect of it. I left with a big smile on my face, wanting to go see this again this weekend. And with my schedule, trying to plan a wedding, trying to buy a house, trying to figure out so many different things and juggle all those aspects, I literally want to make time to go see this movie again. That's how awesome it is. The runtime, it's like only an hour and 35 minutes, so it is a quick moving film. And with that said, we have a lot to talk about today, so make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Are you excited for this movie? Are you not? I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts, as well as hit that like and subscribe button, because if you are a movie nerd and you are just as passionate about movies like I am, you are certainly in the right place. So with that said, let's start with the pros, because this film, it's not perfect. Like there's some things that I can nitpick and we're going to talk about those, but I want to talk about the best aspects of the film first, because I'm all about film positivity. And like I mentioned off the bat, Nick Cage as Dracula might be one of the smartest casting decisions any casting director has ever made. Now, while he is very much more of a supporting role in here, he talks and hams it up in every sort of manner. Any tidbit of Dracula you've ever wanted to see in live action, you get from Nick Cage. And whether it's from the prosthetics, which there is a ton of practical effects, that's also going to be one of my pros we're going to excel on and explain a little bit more in detail in a second, to even just the makeup, the costume design, and all of Nick Cage's mannerisms. I think a lot of us forget that Nick Cage is an amazing actor, and if you still have not seen his film Pig, I highly recommend that, because that film is probably and arguably one of his best performances he's ever given in his entire career. But looking at this, there's certain mannerisms that he gives, whether it's just the way he moves and the way that camera hinges on every movement of him. Like there's one specific moment where I see that he's handing his hand out like this, and you get a side pan view of what his other hand is doing, and the way that it's just behind his back and twisted and moved around, that is like top tier acting, and it's those subtle details that really add a lot to what Nick Cage gives to every single movie role, and I was really impressed with that. But talking about the title character in here, Renfield, played by Nicholas Hoult, there's a great aspect centered around his character. I think Nicholas Hoult shows his comedic purpose, and this kind of reminds me of his role from Warm Bodies, but a little bit more out there and energetic. And I actually found that Hoult, again, just nails this role. And if we're looking at what Chris McKay was able to do as a director, and as well, if you look at the writing department, which is actually written by Ryan Ridley, who I'm not totally familiar on that name, but it's also written by Robert Kirkman, who created The Walking Dead and Invincible comics, you can really feel his passion in there. You can really feel his sensibilities in there, specifically if you've ever read his graphic novels, or of course, maybe you've seen like The Walking Dead with some of the brutal moments in there, but if you have seen Invincible, you can definitely feel the humor, the tone, the graphicness and goriness. That is all there. And I guess that's kind of the best way to explain this movie, is that it has the tone of the most batshit graphic novel you've ever read, but imagine it taking place and having the gory level of Invincible. But instead of it dealing with superheroes, it's dealing with one of the most iconic monsters of all time, Dracula. And I think the humor really works in here as well, because this movie just feels batshit crazy up to 10 the second the film starts. And other than the two main starting roles, Awkwafinia and Ben Schwartz also give wonderful performances in here and give a lot of great humor that all adds in here. And weirdly enough, which I don't think is weird, at least for me, but I think for most people, will be Awkwafinia, while she has the most humor in this, she's actually the most grounded out of all the characters in here, and actually has a big sensibility to her, and all the thematics, again, of a toxic workplace, or a toxic relationship, or a narcissistic boss that maybe you hate that just treats you like crap, or maybe a boyfriend or a girlfriend that treats you like crap. This film actually centers around those and that toxic community, and trying to get out of those toxic areas of life. Every single one of these characters are going through that. There's one character that's going through a toxic friendship. There's one that's, of course, going through the toxic boss life. And there's one who's going through a toxic relationship at work, and specifically the surroundings around work. I love that Awkwafinia was actually able to give a little bit more levity into there. Her humor is off the top, but if you really don't believe her as a dramatic actress yet, go and watch The Farewell. That is one of the best films of the last 5 years, a film that I highly recommend as well. Anytime I get to talk about Awkwafinia, I do like to recommend that movie, because I don't think it was sought out to enough, and absolutely more people need to see that film. Again, their performances are great. They really add to this all, and I spoke about the writers. I definitely want to talk a little bit more about Chris McKay, and specifically his usage of practical effects. Like I mentioned off the top, there is a lot of great prosthetics, a lot of great makeup, a lot of great costume design, and of course the production design for each and every one of the sets is great. The fact that they actually decided to take Dracula and put him into the modern day setting is actually a really brilliant telling, and I actually like how the film, a lot of it is actually narrated by Nicholas Hoult, and you get to see their past, their present, and maybe some tidbits into the future of that entire lifestyle, into where we get to see our characters now. And the whole past sequences throws it back to the era of literally classic filmmaking. From the production design to the style to the black and white tidbits that you've probably seen in the trailers, those are all in here into such a high capacity, and were all things that I was actually very impressed with how they developed. The way that it brings us into the modern day filmmaking style, I was kind of blown away with Chris McKay, and thank God he did the usage of practical effects and practical blood and gore. If you are a horror fanatic, you are going to walk out of this movie with the biggest smile on your face, because you get so much practical blood and gore. I genuinely mean, I have not seen Evil Dead Rise. I see that next week, so look forward to my review on that. I'm sure there's a ton of practical gore and blood on that film. But this is like, in a while, this is up there. And I also haven't seen Terrifier 2, just as a point of reference, but I've heard the same thing there. But if we're looking at a studio-level movie, it has been a while. And I love how there's CGI in here, clearly, but there's a lot of things that's just, again, batshit crazy and just gore fest. And again, I didn't see all the marketing, but I was not expecting that. And to say the least, Chris McKay did a really good job with the action sequences, which at first I was like, ooh, this is not, you know, hand-to-hand style, but he uses a lot of shaky camera and zoom-ins that are very fast-paced, and again, kind of go back to the batshit crazy stuff. And the way that it kind of moves and centers, it kind of just, you get used to it. You get used to the filmmaking style and the pacing of it all, and getting the reaction and the screams of the audience of an arm being ripped off and being thrown across the room and going through a guy's guts. It is wild to what they were able to get away with here, but each and every action scene gets better than the last. And when you get to the final one, you're gonna love it. And all adding and trickling in there is, again, that sense of humor that works and makes you laugh. I don't think there was one bad joke in here. And it all plays on the classic monster movies, as well as just typical humor that you'd see in films like this. And the story about toxic relationships, which I think a lot of us have probably been in at one point in time of our lives, whether it was a workplace, a relationship, or maybe even a friendship. And I really liked how they actually handled that. That was one of the biggest surprising aspects of the film that I was not expecting for them to go about. Do it in a humorous style, but also a serious manner that you can kind of be like, oh, I've been there, and it feels very relatable, and it's kind of funny, but at the same time, no, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm not there right now, but I definitely have seen myself in those positions before, and I was like, okay, yeah, like this film hits home, and I think everyone's going to be able to relate in some way, shape, and form to one of the characters in this film. But like I mentioned off the top, I didn't think this film was perfect, and I do want to talk about a couple nitpicks that I think some people might have. The story is definitely not as fleshed out. It's only an hour and 35 minutes, so if you're going in for a fun time, you're going to enjoy that, but if you're looking for anything a little bit more meatier and deeper than the surface level approach, it's probably not there for you. Well, this is very, very, very gory, and the filmmaking style absolutely is very weird. It probably took me about 10, 15, 20 minutes to get into what the film was actually trying to convey, and once I was sunk in, I was about it all. That is going to be different for a lot of people out there, though. I felt the same thing with Everything Everywhere All at Once, a film that I absolutely loved, but some people that I tried showing the film to could not get into it within the first 25 minutes because of the wacky pacing of it all. I would compare that this film is kind of that same way in the way that it kind of just takes off and really much doesn't let you go until the very end. Last but not least, the only other thing I'll say is that the film does get heavily repetitive towards the back half, and I truly started to feel a little bit of the pacing. While it was only an hour and 35 minutes, I was like, all right, this is kind of a great place to wrap it up. And while I thought it wrapped up in just the perfect manner, bow on top, all sorts of things like that, it did get a little bit repetitive, and I would have liked a little bit something different here and there. I truly mean it. Renfield is awesome. It's a gigantic surprise that had me laughing, reacting, screaming, and dying for the next scene. Cage is so Dracula, and Hoult is amazing as Renfield. It answered the question, what if Mortal Kombat had Dracula? I'm being serious about that. But the best wrap-up of horror action comedies that I could have honestly asked for, and it was, again, one of the biggest surprises I've seen this year. So that said, I'm going to give Renfield a B+. I'm just shocked as you, but it's one of my favorite and most entertaining films of the year. It probably won't stay in my top 10, but it'll definitely be one of those ones that if it does not succeed at the box office this week, I'm going to call it an underrated gem already. Thank you so much again, guys, for watching this. Make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Hit that like and subscribe button for more. Look out for my Evil Dead Rise review coming out next week, and plus tons more. Thank you so much again, and of course, until next time, stay classy.